Well, it's just been raining new releases lately, and I missed this one from quite a while ago, so it's time to catch up with another edition of a Neo-Prog new review. Let's dive into this one.
But time ticks away.
The Second Hand by Anubis. Now, Anubis is a Australian progressive rock band with neo-prog tendencies. I qualify them as a neo-prog band. And much like the Mars Volta, their first release was kind of a grieving process over a friend of theirs who had died. And they followed this up with arguably their magnum opus, their masterpiece of The Tower of Silence. And I've been a fan of the band pretty much since then. The Hitchhiking to Breslin team, I always just call it Hitchhiking, was a really interesting piece as well. We are now 3 years out from there, and we have arrived at The Second Hand. Now, The Second Hand, much like most of their albums up to this point, is a concept album. And it's a concept that has been visited many times by progressive rock artists. It's an individual who's put themselves into some kind of a coma where they're revisited from past hauntings of what they've done, and slowly and surely the listener is putting together why this individual is either a really terrible person, deserves to be in this kind of a coma, and what got them to this point. I mean, the most notable ones are the Human Equation from Arion, as well as Metropolis Part 2 from Dream Theater, Scenes of a Memory. While I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, you know, this has kind of already been done, but with the musical stylings here, it's done in such a new way that I can enjoy it quite well. The best way to describe the music that's found on this is if you took Genesis's And Then There Were Three and just blew that into a progressive magna opus, you really have The Second Hand here. And when you add in the neo-prog, I guess, umbrella, you get the full scope of what to expect within this album. And the album opens up with that kind of clear telling that this is going to be a concept album of, you know, a nurse telling the patient to open his eyes, with newsreel coming in that's overlaying one another to create a narrative flow saying that this guy attempted suicide and failed. He's a very important business conglomerate of some kind. Many lives were lost because of this individual. And these voices come through as though it's like an individual changing the channel on a television. So that structures the album throughout, and we get more narrative styles in and out within the album. And this really ties the album together as well, and provides a great, as I said, almost like a narrative flow throughout. And this works to its advantage by framing the overall album. And that first song, the title track of The Second Hand, really explodes. Like, it takes its time to develop by just having a simple piano piece, kind of noodling away, and then once we get into it, that's where I'm saying this reminds me of And Then There Were Three. The punchy atmosphere, the driving drums, the overall atmosphere of this dark setting really captures the essence that the band is going for. Even though this is very dark, there are quite a number of light moments as well, which really helps facilitate that neo-prog essence. Much like the actual album cover itself, sure, the overall atmosphere is quite dark, but there's lights out there somewhere. And Fool's Gold is a good example of this by providing a much more atmospheric and uplifting piece. It's much more optimistic as well, being set in more of a major chord, and it's less angsty and less punchy as the preceding song. And this is met with These Changing Seasons Part 1, which again opens up the door even further into an optimistic atmosphere. This provides the first kind of reflection of this character, saying, you know, changing of seasons is a good thing. You know, this might have been my past, but maybe it doesn't have to be my future. And I really enjoy that kind of an outlet for this. Now, unfortunately, this is met with one of the darker songs of The Making of Me, and this is really building up that character by looking into his past to see where we got from here. The one part that I do enjoy from this is the lead vocals of Robert James Moulding, and the harmonizations that we have with Dean Benson. These two really work well together, and I'm glad that they had more of a leg stretching in this piece. It's not my favorite piece on this album, and it isn't until we get to the next track that I really start to get into the groove, shall we say. And that's with While Rome Burns. Now, this song is the second longest track, and probably my second favorite track on this. We hear again the hospital ticking away within this character's mind, and it slowly builds into such a great payoff. This is why I love this band. They are able to really experience a build and then have such a fantastic payoff to get us to that next plateau. And once we get to that plateau, the fun atmosphere that is felt here, yes, we're back into that really dark and guttural place, but it's that fun atmosphere that really makes me groove along to what I'm listening to. And this is followed out with Blackout, and Blackout is such a intense song. What I really like is the playout for this, where they just come into such a great rhythm section and great groove. And this is followed out with Blackout, a really gnarly and just gut-wrenching track. It takes the momentum that we had from While Rome Burns and just pushes it forward. What I particularly enjoy about this is the playout section we have for this. Now, the last three tracks close out the album. These Changing Seasons Part 2, as well as this Page of Stone, and then These Changing Seasons Part 3. And these three tracks, I really, really enjoy them. And it's a perfect kind of sandwich. These Changing Seasons Part 2, this is definitely the lights that we see out into the distance. And then from there we go into one of the most dark songs on the album, and the longest track being well into 16 minutes. And the Pages of Stone is just one of my favorite epics of this year. We've had a couple of them, but this is by far my favorite. There's never a dull moment, and it just moves from one meaty hook to another meaty hook to another meaty hook. And each time I think, okay, they can't outperform this one, they move on to the next one, which outperformed it. It's one of the few almost perfect epics, and that's hard to do within this day and age when there's so much rehashing of territories. This one just blew me away, and I couldn't help but love the journey. And finally, the album closes off with These Changing Seasons Part 3. Again, that beautiful, optimistic kind of close-out song. It's a great way to end the album. It puts that final seal into the tomb of it, and it just leaves me on a high note that makes me want to come back again right to the first track. So overall, I've been loving this album, and I've been loving to revisit it. This is the type of album that I just love really sinking my teeth into and getting into and just enveloping myself within the music. And I've got to say, you've got to find this on physical format and pick it up, because it is a treat. So that's about it. What did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know of your own thoughts of Anubis' new album, The Second Hand, by commenting down below. Also, what other Neo-Prog bands do you want me to check out? Leave those down below as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.